A bomb explosion and ensuing clashes near a government compound in the Afghan capital, Kabul, has left at least 29 people dead. Nearly 20 people also sustained injuries. The unidentified gunmen stormed the government compound after the blast and exchanged fire with security forces. At least 4 of the attackers were killed in the clashes. Nearly 200 employees were trapped inside the compound, but security forces managed to free all of them. The gunmen also opened fire on the country's intelligence agency. No group has claimed responsibility for the bloodshed. To discuss that more, we're joined by former U.S. Army Psychological Warfare Officer Scott Bennett. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us, Mr. Bennett. Now, what do you make of this situation? Afghanistan is becoming more and more insecure, whereas when the U.S. deployed its troops there, it was supposed to fight terrorism and bring peace and security back, not only to Afghanistan but to the region. It seems that instead, over the past 17 years, Taliban and other extremist groups have even gained more power than they had before.
Well, I think what we're witnessing is the failed policy of interventionism that we should have learned from the British Empire in the late 1800s when they intervened in Afghanistan. We should have learned from the Soviets when they intervened. And of course, the United States and CIA paid Tim Osmond, who was also known as Osama bin Laden, who was a CIA colonel, to facilitate the Stinger missiles that the U.S. sent against the Soviets. And then, of course, we launched the false flag attack of September 11th, 2001 is the great trigger to do the grand chessboard overthrow, which Dick Cheney and President Bush and so many other of the neocon Zionists had planned. And over 18 years, their plan has failed, but with a miserable blood cost. So Afghanistan, of course, has proven to be a fiasco and a Vietnam that the United States people suffered the most in, as well as the poor souls of Afghanistan and the Taliban, which were never responsible for the September 11th attacks. But now we're witnessing an opportunity to really confirm that and hopefully pull the United States troops out, allow Afghanistan to be ruled by the Afghanis, allow the other nations of the neighborhood to determine how Afghanistan grows. That would be Iran, that would be Russia, that would be China. And I think President Trump, with the removal from Syria, is most likely going to embark on a similar path of removing the United States from Afghanistan, because the people of America don't want this. They don't want their troops over there. They don't want them risking their lives for nothing. And sadly, we've had 18 years of bloodshed for absolutely nothing.
Mr. Bennett, thank you very much for pointing to President Donald Trump's recent policy of drawing down the number of troops in Afghanistan to half almost. Why this change of heart all of a sudden?
Well, I would like to think he is finally listening to the American people, that he realizes he was elected because the American people did not want to continue the wars in the Middle East. They were appalled that George W. Bush and Barack Obama had engaged in this false flag attack, and they were sickened and disgusted, and they voted for Donald Trump to change that. And he promised to change that. He promised to get out of Syria. He promised to normalize relations with Russia, but unfortunately he's had neocon Zionists surrounding his cabinet, like John Bolton and Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo and Lindsey Graham and all of these others that are infatuated, if not mentally deranged, with the bloodlust of war and the profits that are accumulated from the military-industrial complex. The politicians enjoy it because they're forever enshrined in their office, and their campaigns are financed by Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Booz Allen Hamilton, but it's almost like war is chemotherapy to the military-industrial complex. And when I say that, I mean chemotherapy ends up killing the patient. So war is killing the American people. It's killing our rights and killing our Constitution. Besides killing our reputation with the rest of the world, it's turning us into the picture of Dorian Gray, a bloody, monstrous hulk of brutality, rather than the beautiful city on a hill that Ronald Reagan had envisioned. So Donald Trump, I think, is paying attention finally, and he's getting his second wind. And I'm hoping and praying that in the second wind for the next 2 years, he's going to do a massive military retrenchment, pull the United States out of Afghanistan, out of Syria, pull us out of aggression against Russia, extend a hand of collaboration and open talks with Iran for another JCPOA that doesn't put Iran's security at risk, but recognizes that the JCPOA under Obama was very suspect because it came from Obama, and he's seen as one of the worst presidents in the history of the country. So Donald Trump has to be given a little bit of excuse and flexibility because he's never been a government man. He's never been in the military either. So he's sort of feeling his way along, and I know that's very trying for a lot of world diplomatic leaders like Zarif and Lavrov and some of the people in China. But we have to recognize Donald Trump really does hopefully represent the best hope for peace in our century, because he's not a politician. But we have to keep him accountable, and we have to keep him online to say, in every diplomatic opportunity for communication, say, Mr. President Trump, you were elected by your people to stop these wars and stop burning down of the civilization, to stop the mass exodus of refugees and migrants into Europe. And your chance to do that is now. Let us come back to the table and draw up plans for the next 100 years where America, Russia, Iran, China can all live in peace, and Europe will naturally incline towards peace too. And if he doesn't, I think Europe will choose its side to be much more socially and politically aligned with Russia, Iran, and China than with the United States. But I'm hopeful he'll listen, and there's no better country to do it than Iran, because it's thousands of years old and has the history and wisdom of the ages on its side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott Bennett, former U.S. Army Psychological Warfare Officer, joining us live from San Francisco.